Welcome to Free to Speak, the New Zealand Free Speech Union podcast. If you enjoy the show, subscribe for uncensored conversations and free speech news from New Zealand and beyond.
Kia ora and welcome to Free to Speak, the official podcast of the New Zealand Free Speech Union. I'm your host today, Dane Giroux, a council member of the Free Speech Union, and joining me is another council member of our illustrious union, Annie O'Brien.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So today we're going to talk about the second COVID inquiry. We will probably need to venture outside of the free speech realm a little just to get context and everything, but we will try as best we can to stick to the whole free speech element of it. You wrote a really great, very detailed piece on your wonderful Substack. And it wasn't... I mean, talk about we can't be partisan, but, even in the title, it's not like you're that. You don't sound like a big fan of Chris Hipkins. Let's be honest. Now.
Look, I'm very honest about that, and there are personal reasons for that too. And so I don't hide that. And generally in my writing, I try to provide some balance, but I also just am very explicit when I'm not providing balance, and that was one case. I also think that because of how pro and forgiving our media have been in regards to this report and in regards to COVID, that it's balance in itself to provide another alternative view of it. And I guess in my piece, I absolutely said, early stages of the pandemic, I think our government did really well. I think that they were dealing with immensely confusing, uncertain times. The whole world was trying to figure out what the hell was going on and how bad it was. Everyone was going, okay, are we overreacting to this? Are we underreacting to this? What do we need to do? And I really think that those early stages, they handled it as best they could, and kudos to them. And that seems to be where our media stops, is that they're like, yeah, we did the best. This was great. Whereas I think that in order to learn from these things and provide useful reflection, we need to look at some of the stuff that didn't go well. We learn from the stuff that we mess up, not from the stuff that we celebrate. So I kind of got into some of the main reasons why the main criticisms that were raised in the report, and I feel like I was fair in the sense that they are what was in the report. They are fair criticisms, but yes, I did go in pretty hard because I really detest lack of accountability in leaders. And it really feels like there's massive dodging of accountability on a lot of this stuff.
Well, you make a good point. Someone has to do it. We can't just have a cheerleading media. Someone has to do it. Someone has to go in and be. People even need to be unnecessarily hard on leaders sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they can be corrected too, but you need that push and pull constantly to get the facts out there. That's the marketplace of ideas. That's the sort of collision of ideas that truth sort of can come out of.
Well, I mean, the actual basis of Western democracy, of our legal systems, is an adversarial one. And I think sometimes we forget that serves a function. It's not necessarily a nasty negative thing to provide that opposition. And that was one of I was working for the opposition for part of COVID. And one of the most difficult things was trying to oppose effectively when the media had basically decided that any opposition or questioning was tantamount to treason. And it was a really hard time to provide any kind of form of opposition to government action. And it's actually, as I say, a very important function in our democracy. Just like we have in our court system, we have, the opposing sides take an adversarial stance and argue it out in front of a jury or a judge. That's the same way our political system is set up. And it's because through argument, we are able to distill truth We're able to elicit weakness. And that is the function of an opposition. So a lot of people kind of get a bit aggrieved about opposition being too nitpicky or being a bit of a pain. But actually, their core function is to find every weakness.
To be a bit of a pain.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it kind of, that is where one of my big bugbears for the pandemic was that culturally, if not formally, that was really repressed. And I do hold our media mostly responsible, but also Ardern, Hipkins and Robertson really drove that as well. And basically it was, there was only one true narrative. It cannot be questioned. And any questioning of it is either disinformation, misinformation, or treason, and it meant that not only were individuals deprived of their speech rights, but also the function of dissent in a democracy was completely dismantled.
Compromised.
And it didn't serve us well because some of the kind of tricky things that cropped up, they weren't able to be really wrestled with by opposition and government to produce the best outcome. It was just whatever reckons Ardern and Hipkins came up with, that was what kind of happened. And inevitably with humans, you have all sorts of competing agendas and ideas, and also no one human has all the expertise as well. And so there was a lot of stuff that was not challenged sufficiently enough because challenge was not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, there were clearly issues where they knew that they were playing a bit fast and loose and going against expert advice, but compliance was obviously more important to them than the truth necessarily, which is exactly why we need a free speech union,
Yeah, we do. And I think people probably have underestimated the effect of the silencing and repression of any dissent on our COVID response. Unfortunately, I think that some people think that was a feature, not a bug. And they actually think it was a good thing to just, to kind of repress the inconvenient people who spoke out against or questioned. And I think that is a shame that people see things like that. But if you look at the phase 2 report, you've got the main kind of report, and then you've got a kind of distilling of the perspectives that came out of the interviews and whatnot that they did. And they don't give too much time in the report to matters of speech and censorship and that kind of thing. But in the perspective section, you can see that there's a lot of people who are saying things like, look, I've always been pro-vaccination, but I didn't like the mandates, which was where I sat.
Yeah, I sat there too. That's where I was at, yeah.
And they're saying, look, I tried to, have discussions about it, or I'd put something online, it was taken down, it's like they kind of, there was a lot of people who felt really aggrieved by the imposition on their speech rights. And I think it's important that is part of the conversation of what happened, part of the reconciliation, if you will. And I don't think it has been enough. I think rightly people have focused on the medical evidence and the legal stuff. That is totally understandable. But I do think that there needs to be a bit of a reckoning, a bit of a discussion around just how authoritarian our government got just like that.
Well, the Disinformation project was sort of created as a response to COVID disinformation, wasn't it?
Well, it was created to prevent people from speaking inconveniently and labeling it disinformation. A lot of what was being said was actually, things like the changing narratives around the origins of the virus, right? So that's changed several times, the
Mm.
kind of public narrative.
What is accepted, yeah.
Yeah, and so people who weren't in step with whatever was the current thing were absolutely kind of castigated. And so there were so many things that were not allowed to be said, and that changed over time. And then things like the Disinformation Project came along to punish those who were saying the inconvenient things at the wrong time. A lot of it was around vaccines, and there were some pretty wild things out there, but
Yeah.
it's not illegal to have wild theories. And unfortunately now, with this report coming out, at least in one area, a lot of these people have been proven right. Not the most extreme theories that were out there, but in the context of people who were vocally worrying about myocarditis risks for young men in particular, but young people in general, were told that they were misinformation, disinformation, anti-vaxxers, causing a bother kind of thing. And it's now come out through this report that the government ignored medical advice and mandated that vaccine for 12 to 17-year-olds when they were told not to. So it is really quite, when you look at it in that light, yes, silencing the public provided an easier time for leadership to make decisions and to impose them. But there's also a real ethical problem here, because people were silenced and they've been proven right. And I argue, and you argue, that even if they hadn't been proven right, they shouldn't have been silenced. But especially in a case of a medical crisis, a medical, worldwide pandemic, to silence people who are quite rightly talking about, wow, this is all happening so fast. Do we know about the safety aspects of this vaccine? Even that kind of talk was completely not okay. It was shut down, and it was seen as kind of subversive. And that is totally wrong. And we should be learning from this. There should be a massive section in the report that says the human rights of citizens were impacted in regards to, there's other aspects of human rights that were impacted as well. But in this case, speech rights, New Zealanders were not able to voice concerns, to question government action, which are fundamental parts of being in a liberal democracy. Like, I think people kind of think we're joking when we say our government went authoritarian, but they really did for a time there. It was the kind of things that you would expect in a North Korea or a CCP China, where simply questioning a government decision was enough to get you to lose your job. That is authoritarian regime stuff, and it came out of nowhere, and that is concerning. And we should be analysing, how do we ensure that those conditions are not set up again, so that if we have a crisis, it's the lever that the government pulls isn't, I'm just going to shut off all ability for people to question and dissent.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll get to what exactly was in the report. You have touched on the younger people, the advice not to have two shots there. I think most people intuitively knew that was probably wrong, but fear, mob mentality, you know what I mean? They sort of, people go along with that kind of stuff. But I want to go back a little, Annie, and just talk about getting to the point where we have an inquiry at all, because a lot of people didn't think there was any need to have one, which I found really bizarre. Like, I don't care. I don't care if you're Moses, right? If there's an emergency and you're taking all this control for trust alone, we need to put everything out on the table and know exactly what went wrong. We can be forgiving. People can be forgiving, but a lot of people didn't even want an inquiry at all. So can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I think people misunderstand the purpose of inquiries as well. Like, I think a lot of people think, oh, this is just so that we can kind of flagellate the leaders and punish them. It's not just about that, and it's not actually just about learning lessons either. There is also a cathartic purpose, which is that when something really hard happens, you talk to people who are proponents of restorative justice, and they'll talk about it in the sense of the justice system. But when something terrible happens, we often need to process these things and feel like we've been heard and that what we went through has been acknowledged. And so the purpose of these inquiries actually serves that purpose. And I think it's probably the most important purpose that it serves, is that it gives the people an opportunity to say, this hurt me, this impacted me, and my rights were impinged on, and I did not like this, and I don't think this should happen again. And so they get to have their say. And then in theory, these independent people say, yep, they're right. They were hurt and they were treated wrongly. The government shouldn't do this again, but it was probably fair that they did this. And then hopefully the decision makers accept some responsibility. Unfortunately, Hipkins has been very dismissive, not interested in apologising for some of those big decisions that he made against advice. Ardern and Robertson have both accepted the findings of the report, which I think is good, because that demonstrates that they acknowledge those things that they got wrong. And so I think that purpose is poorly understood. And so for people who didn't feel like COVID impacted them, and there was a large chunk of usually quite privileged people who could work from home.
The laptop class.
The laptop class, yep. And you know what? I'm one of them, but I see things a bit different than a lot of them, I think. And so it was work from home, do your sourdough, drinks on Zoom. It was all, actually, they quite enjoyed it. And now a lot of them refuse to go back to the office, It's actually kind of, there's a nostalgia for it, right? Yeah. And so these people don't feel particularly aggrieved. They are like, actually, this was a great time, and that they kind of feel like everyone's making a much ado about nothing. And so there is a disconnect, I think, from a lot of, particularly, as you say, the laptop class, who are often in the positions of decision-making in our bureaucracy, public service, not understanding just how much it affected other parts of the population. And so you have this effect of dismissing the grievance of a good chunk of the population. And you saw it play out with the protest at Parliament. They were demonized, man. Really demonized.
That's an aspect of it, and that's what the Disinformation project did too. I mean, they were sort of set up to smear people in a way.
Totally.
Just be a bullying, like a sort of a semi-official bullying crew of bullies. It was
It was quite amazing. I went down, so I was living in Wellington at the time, and so I went down to the protest and just went around and talked to people, because I really wanted to understand what it was that had driven them to take up on the grounds of Parliament and really show their displeasure with the government. And I wish that every New Zealander would have gone down on the ground and seen what I saw, because what I saw in the media and what I saw in reality were two different things. So the media had these kind of scary, they were talking about Nazis, they were trying to portray it as this real awful...
a massive far-right rally, basically.
Yeah. And I got down there, and yes, it was heavily, I'd say, skewed in terms of working class, some middle class people who had been forced out of jobs, because it was predominantly more working class and service-based people rather than laptop class who lost their jobs, especially due to the vaccine mandates. And so it's a classic case, I think, of the upper classes being like, look at them deplorables, to quote Hillary Clinton, and really demonizing them. also, it was disproportionately Māori, which I found really interesting, because usually our media and the government would have really hammered that and, would have listened to, our tangi whenua, blah, blah, blah. Not these ones. They had the wrong opinions. So they were not useful to them.
Yeah, see, for me, Māori taking a stand against something like that makes perfect sense, because minority group, that distrust of power is going to be there, especially with Māori.
Yeah, and that's what I think the government forgets, because, that government forgot, because they had asserted a kind of ownership over the Māori vote and over Māori perspectives, and said we're the ones who represent them, and that's carried over with the change of government. There's been a real ownership claimed by the opposition now, and so for them it's really inconvenient when the kind of traditional historical position of Māori as having more distrust with the government, with good historical reason, when it shines through like it did in COVID, that's really inconvenient for them. And so they were not going to acknowledge that or platform it. So they didn't like to show any of the Māori faces on media. And it wasn't until it was like it all kind of turned to crap and everyone was fighting, the police were all fighting, that was like you kind of got to look at all the faces that were involved. But I think as you say, there are certain groups in society who tend to traditionally have a higher level of distrust in government. Generally, they have gone through periods where they've had very good reason to distrust government. And in particular, those groups of people are seen as a threat in times of where the government's trying to assert control. But the point I was wanting to make about the protest was about the distinct different experiences, and the fact that those who experienced material suffering under COVID, and I call it that because there were people who their financial situation went from perhaps stable to utterly devastated. They lost jobs, they lost houses, they lost relationships because of the stress, and a lot of the laptop class had absolutely no idea about that. No idea.
They will argue that they brought it on themselves, just get the vaccine. But Damien Grant made a good point, a rare good point. No.
He does occasionally.
But he said, look, if you think that a vaccine is going to harm you or your child, that's the kind of belief that's equivalent to Jesus died and rose again. Like, it's not necessarily a belief you're just going to get over.
It's a pretty strong belief.
It's a very strong belief. So
well, it's instinctual, and actually, this is something that I think gets ignored a lot by our political class nowadays, all over the world actually, and that is that there are certain human instincts that aren't actually social or cultural. They are built into us, and in this case, the desire to protect one's children is a built-in function. And so if you believe, as you say, that there is a threat towards your child,
or there could possibly be a threat, even possibly.
In most cases, parents are not going to budge, because evolutionarily, we are programmed to protect our young and to ensure that they get to adulthood. And so social conditioning, like how our government tried to do with a lot of the stuff around the vaccine, a lot of the kind of coercion of mandates, was never going to work on those who had already entrenched that belief that this was a harm to their children. What would have perhaps made a difference would have been getting into the detail of the vaccine, the science, and assuring people that it was safe. And in the process, if they learnt, as they would have done with this, what's come out in the report, that it isn't safe for this group of people, then they should have acted accordingly. And that would have made more trust. If the government would have said, look, actually, we're not going to mandate it for anyone under 29. I think it was 29 that was the actual advice, because there is enough of a risk, although low, of this heart condition. And if we compare that to the risk of COVID and what that would do to a young person, which it was not fatal in most cases, it really wasn't. So we've weighed it up. We're not going to mandate it for under 29s. There would probably have been more trust in the kind of advice that it was safe for older people, because the government was willing to make the concession that it actually was not safe here.
So Chris Hipkins hasn't spoken to this, has he? He hasn't given any justification for why they ignored that advice.
No, and the media haven't asked him.
Yeah, which is just insane. But I wonder, just trying to think about why you would not put that narrative out there. Were they thinking something like, well, if there's any talk of heart conditions and dangers like that, that might start breaking down compliance generally? Because people might go, well, I'm 20, it says 29, but I'm 33 and I'm a young 33, you know.
I'm 35 and I feel like, 25.
Well, I would have done that. I would have gone, look, I'm 51, but I'm a young 51. No. But who knows, you know? So, but that's not good, because again, it's like compliance is everything. If that's the case, I mean, I'm getting a bit excited and I'm putting words in his mouth, but yeah.
Well, in the absence of him explaining it, I think we're entitled to speculate.
So that's exactly right too. In the absence of him fronting, we're going to speculate.
And I do think you're right. That would have played a part in it. They were very set on getting compliance. My concern is that there were other elements that drove that other than this will be the best health outcome for New Zealanders. I think there was a bit of hubris in this whole idea of wanting to have the highest compliance rate in the world. And I think it was a huge mistake that the Herald did their, pardon me, the Herald did their, I think it was like get to 90 or something. And I think in hindsight, they might think twice about that as well, because it became advocacy instead of reporting on the facts as they were. So I think there was a lot of hubris tied up into, we're going to have the best response, we're going to have the highest compliance, you know, and so that sometimes distracted from the core purpose, which should have been, we need to get through this with basically the lowest negative impact on our people. Now, lethality of the virus was number one thing to consider in that. Yep, but it wasn't the only thing.
Which groups were? You know, that would have been the number one thing to consider for me.
Yeah, and really, I think that is a huge learning, is that we should have doubled down our effort on protecting the elderly without restricting the rest of the population, elderly and vulnerable in other ways. But I think we haven't been allowed to have that conversation about those decisions, because I think the answers probably aren't that great. I think if he was to answer honestly, why did you create the boundary against all advice? Why did you extend the lockdown against advice? Why did you mandate for children against advice? I think his answers there wouldn't be satisfactory answers there. I think it was that they got so caught up in their own authority that they made decisions based on their own reckons, which as a minister you have a right to do.
Well, Winston Peters is a good example of that, isn't he? Like not taking advice from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on
state of Palestine.
In fact, on Palestine.
There are real reasons why, because you can get captured departments, and you and sometimes the advice you're getting is conflicting to other advice. So there are very good reasons that ministers are allowed to ignore officials.
And experts like a Susie Wiles, for instance, isn't thinking about the economy. You know, like some of those people, they're not thinking, but they're thinking about something and that's okay, because they have a lane.
They're in their niche, right?
Yeah.
And that's right. And so the ministers were absolutely right to take advice from the economists, from the scientists, from the social scientists. A
Bring them
criticism,
together and find
yeah.
Mm.
However, a criticism is that they lean too heavily on the epidemiologists without considering the advice from some of the other experts who would have said, you're going to cause higher mortality for social reasons, or because of economic deprivation and a massive transfer of wealth.
Which is why when Ardern said if we lose one person, it's one person too many or something like that.
Which
It's
is,
like, well, you're going to lose, I mean, a lot of people that died from COVID would have probably died within a year or so anyway.
yeah, I mean, there is that. But
many
also,
of them were in their 80s. I mean, that was the highest group that were going to pass. So, yeah, we don't want to lose any mother or grandmother or anything like that. But shutting down entire economies over protecting that group is just not, it's just not that clever, really, is it?
Unfortunately for Jacinda, that she shouldn't have the luxury of saying that. So for individuals, normal citizens, whatever, we can think, oh, one death is too many because it's my nana or it's, my friend or whatever. As a leader of a country and as a government, they are making decisions every day, whether they like it or not, about who lives and who dies. Think about the decisions they make about which drugs they fund, for example.
Yeah.
So there are people who die earlier because they don't have access to the most cutting edge drugs on this thing because they've decided to fund this thing and made sure people don't die for that.
So
there
it's very slogany
trade-offs.
and it's a very disingenuous comment, isn't it?
Well, and I think the trouble there is because we weren't allowed to challenge that, because if you said anything like what I just said, you were accused of wanting to kill nanas and basically being the worst person on earth. But what I just said is the practical reality of governing. It's the trade-offs. It's the decision-making that has real impact. But we couldn't say it because it undermined the messaging of needing this like total response, 0 deaths, 0, 0, 0.
Do you think there's a distinction to be made? Because we've got to be careful probably not to muddy the waters around what the government is doing in terms of censorship and what the mob is doing. So there's a mob online that are really pushing a lot of this. How much of it is government?
Well, they're very separate things, but they also interact. So a lot of the mob online were highly supportive of the government. So there is that kind of political affiliation. However, the mobs often were responsible for, if we exclude the mandate-related job losses, they were responsible for the cancellations. So if someone online criticized an aspect of the response, and someone screenshot it, sent it to their employer, everyone piled on. That was how a lot of people were getting silenced, censored, and then suffering consequences for it. That was I think, a hideous aspect of the whole COVID period. I think it existed anyway, as we know, with the culture wars and identity politics, the kind of
and any emergency like this would bring out that sort of personality, I think.
You have a type of person who is inclined to, being an authoritarian in their own life,
looking
in their
at
own
the
lunchtime,
curtains and going, that person's put 2 rubbish bags. They've got 5 rubbish bags. They should have 2. I only have 2. That kind of person, yeah.
Well, I thought it was the most hideous thing was the telling on each other's neighbours. Like, I was like, I mean, I guess, again, it's this idea of if you think it's a genuine threat, but I don't actually believe that these people thought that someone having drinks in their driveway a little bit too close to their neighbours was going to kill anyone. I think they just liked asserting authority, seeing the results of that
the power.
authority.
And the play The Crucible by Arthur Miller? About the witch trials, and he was using it as a comment on the Red Scare, But a lot of the witch trials, there were cases where that accused people of witchcraft so they could buy their land once they got killed.
Well, this is what humans do. Humans are duplicitous.
Exactly. So the neighbour's probably like, I've never liked that fence. And this is my chance to really stick it to that person who put that ugly fence between our houses.
Well, I mean, it gave people the power to punish in a way that they probably hadn't had before, Like, it's the same kind of instinct that has people calling noise control on neighbours they don't like and stuff,
Yeah.
But there was something really gross about how it was encouraged. So Ardern really encouraged this tattling on your neighbours. And
did she know?
Yes, she did. You can go back and she's like literally says like you can call the police and like it's
That's not
just
good.
No, it wasn't. And so and I thought it really undermined the other message of this team of 5 million. I think in situations like this, you should side with your neighbours over your government. It should be that there's a solidarity of we're getting through this horrible thing. Sure, if your neighbour's got COVID and is coughing in your window, then maybe I don't know. But for like minor things and even the thing that I kind of was like, how did we get to this was people just going for a walk on the beach, getting the sea air, not being anywhere near anyone else. And I mean, the irony was that one of the chief kind of advisors and experts on telling people not to do this kind of thing was then caught going for a walk and sitting on the beach.
Yeah.
But I think there was so many aspects of it that were nonsensical, but all pieced together to be this like part of this picture of control. And because we couldn't question one, we couldn't question another, and the whole apparatus kind of was able to continue.
The one that got me, Annie, was like going to a restaurant, having your mask on, and then going.
When you sat down, you were allowed to take it off.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I think that was in America somewhere. They were doing that.
Oh, my God.
So you sit down, you take it off, and then there's a force field around your table at that moment while you eat. It's like, okay, you could argue, well, you're limiting the duration of time and everything, but it's not going to, I mean, if it was that concontagious, it's not going to
there was
matter.
a lot of real
performative and absurd and stupid. Yeah.
And I think on a free speech level, when speech is curtailed and dissent is prevented, things get more and more absurd because people don't have to provide reason and logic. They can just declare something.
And there are going to be contradictions.
Yeah.
Well, a good example was like one of the lockdowns got broken by the Black Lives Matter movement, didn't it? Remember that?
Oh, that was one of the
Big
worst
protest.
Contradictions.
And what happened is Jacinda didn't really, she was like, oh, well, our team kind of supports that protest, so I'm not really going to say too much.
Well, even experts were like, because of the social, it was like because of the social impacts of racism.
That's right. Yeah.
That is more of a public health issue than COVID.
Who are we to say?
Then why are we in our houses?
I know. But the idea that they would think that most people who weren't like far left activists would go, oh, okay. I mean, no one's going to do. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
It was so bizarre, and especially then in the fervor with which they treated any protest against the lockdowns or mandates or whatever. It then provided a really stark contrast of a government that said, if we agree with your belief or we agree with what you have to say, you can protest because it doesn't hurt us at all. But if you were protesting against us, which is what protest usually is, it's usually against power, right? Then it's not okay. And so it really, protest was not okay. Only performative, government approved
messaging, I mean, it was nuts. Hey, going back to the whole diversity of people at the parliamentary protests and how there is a talking over minorities that often happens with, I think, government on both sides, to be honest. But, that's where Galen Barnes' film River of Freedom was so good and so important. Like, that film was like close to 3 hours. And it just spoke to so many people. And you got to see the diversity.
It is very valuable, that kind of work. I mean, it didn't get the recognition it deserves, I think, because it's subversive. It's challenging the official narrative.
It was one of the higher grossing documentaries, not on the record, but it was like it was selling out everywhere they went.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
but that often happens with art and product like this. In New Zealand. It's like our most famous comedians in terms of name recognition and everything would be Maori and Polynesian kids in South Auckland making clips on their phones, but they're not anointed by the state. And so
because they probably say stuff that's like not approved by the state.
It's not.
Right?
It's not approved, but they would be the people with the biggest followings. And
well, I mean, you look in America at documentaries, and in the last few years, the most successful grossing ones have been this year. It's Melania's one, which I haven't seen, but
neither.
Yeah, whatever. But all of Trump supporters and stuff, probably a whole bunch of them have gone out and seen it. It's grossed higher than most documentaries, and yet it will not be touched by any of the awards or kind of acknowledged or given any favorable treatment by any of the newspapers reviewing it. Likewise, Matt Walsh's documentaries, he did one on race and one on sex and gender, and they were some of the most successful documentaries, and they were ignored by all of the kind of official apparatus that does awards and that kind of thing. And so I think it is just it's that evidence that these kind of spaces in the arts now are totally just part of the power structure. And art used to be a place for subversion, a place for dissent, a place for challenge. Now it's usually in line with power.
Well, I had this discussion with David Kuhlman when we talked about the Adelaide Writers' Festival and the Palestinian writer.
Well, that was a self-inflicted wound, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. But my experience of funding bodies and everything, I don't know about. I mean, they definitely have power, but when you say part of the power structure, they're all of a class. And I have an example of the Takanini tire changer, who is a character that I've sort of created that you will never see on one of those panels, you know, going, oh, I'd like to see this, that guy's never going to be there, So people
it's like the
of
people
a class,
deciding what gets funded.
Yeah.
The people deciding what gets funded are genuinely of the laptop class, that they are
politically pretty
educated.
homogeneous.
Yeah, they're all left or hard left. They're all university educated, urban, mostly white, and a lot of women, highly women. And so they are, and I realize I've described myself by and large. Again, I worry for my people. This is why I tell people I am so worried for my people. My white women, kind of liberal background, university educated, urban. Like, what is going on? Like, my people have lost their minds.
The point I made to David is it's the kind of institution too that, like, if the Takanini tire changer got the opportunity, like within a month he'd probably be woke, because it'd be like, I make lots of money now and I'm on this board and I'm doing this thing.
I would hope not. I would hope that his life experience would kind of been. I also think what tends to happen is if you get someone brave enough and anti-woke enough into these situations, they are able to interrupt some of those narratives and challenge some of the stuff, but it depends on the strength of, they either get assholed out of there really quickly or they're able to make inroads. It's terrifying though.
I got a story about that. And I told Brian this, but I had a show with Warner Brothers that was a satire on Brian Tamaki and Destiny Church and the media. So I was taking a crack at, basically I was having a crack at everyone, but it was a relationship between the media, Brian, perception. It was all about that. And I put together a diverse writers table. So I had a Samoan writer, Maori writer from out South Auckland, but I had a lovely woman, but a woke woman, and I knew she was woke and I wanted her there for that because I didn't want us to go all in one direction. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to, end up being too cruel to that media class. Like, I think I needed to, well, it's just a
Is that possible?
No, well, for me as a writer, like, it's interesting, when I've got the writer's hat on, I humanize everyone. It's just, when I'm not writing, I dehumanize everyone. But when I'm writing, I humanize everyone. So,
Oh, you noble soul.
so I had her there, and there were some really interesting discussions we had. And one discussion, which was fascinating, is she was talking about how one of the characters about racism, and so, well, that's not racism if he does it, because there's a power imbalance, because that person's white. Yeah, she was doing the power imbalance thing. And my friend, who's like pretty connected guy out south, and he goes, well, hang on a minute. Okay, bus stop, 1 a.m, mongrel mob guy there with "I hate Pākehā" tattooed across his head, and a businessman who weighs about 65 kilos. Who's got the power? And she's like, oh. And he said, power changes. Your power changes
situationally.
Every room you enter, there's going to be a different relationship to that power. And that was a Maori guy from South Auckland making that point to her. And she didn't, and she was really good about it. She was like, oh, she hadn't considered it. And
well,
by
I think
the end
that's
of
why you challenge that idea of the power, because the power is differential, as you say, it's situational.
Yeah.
So the whole concept of racism, when we first conceived of it, was that it was prejudice or discrimination against someone based on the color of their skin or their ethnicity, and that was pretty. It takes into account all things being equal, whatever. It's that matters. Once you introduce the kind of intellectualized university version, which introduces the power dynamic, all that they've done is control the narrative by going, actually, only these people are entitled to be aggrieved by racism.
Yeah.
Because only they can be truly impacted by it.
Well, it's actually, but it gets even worse than that. They want to be racist. So change the definition of racism, then they can be racist. They will
give
call
yourself
Jews,
permission.
That's what they're doing. They want to be racist. That's why
Why
would you feel any need at all to change the definition of racism? Why?
Yeah.
It works. It works. Why would you have any need to do that? Because they don't want to feel sorry for Jews is one reason.
Yeah.
And they want to sort of, maybe poor whites and other groups, or even Indians and Asians, as we've seen in America. They've been discriminated against.
Not just America. If you talk to, if you actually, they don't tend to emphasize this in their reports, but if you look at the Human Rights Commission data, the group in New Zealand who experienced the most violence as a result of racial hatred are Asian New Zealanders.
Yeah, that's horrendous.
Yeah.
But we don't. It's not. Yeah, we don't get a lot of campaigns, and we don't get a lot of talk about it from the. Very interesting. Why? Because a lot of them vote National.
I don't think that's why. I think it's probably more complicated in terms of who the perpetrators are as well.
I get you. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot of race politics going on.
Not helpful at all. No good no good ending to that story. It's just, and that's that violation of equality, that, censorship, because, this, what we're just talking about, censorship, if it came in, would be fitting into that paradigm, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be fitting into the classic, paradigm of discrimination, prejudice based against someone on the color of their skin or who they're. It would be based on that paradigm, the power imbalance.
Well, there is, if we, we've kind of strayed quite far from
it's a
from
conversation.
COVID, but we'll go with it.
It's a conversation.
If you look at who is allowed to say things about race and be critical of other races, that is skewed depending on what your race is, right? So as you say, that censorship model applies depending on who the speaker is. And so for a Māori to have a grievance with white New Zealanders, perhaps based on historical wrongs that have nothing to do with the person now, that is seen as acceptable. It's seen as justified to impose that historical action on the person now because of racial conceptions that are intellectual. However, if a white person takes an issue with another race because of some historical thing, it is, well, for any reason, it is completely unacceptable. So there is a conditional censorship already on how we speak about things. I often speak very openly about race, and it gets me called a lot of things. I'm in a biracial relationship. I'm not racist, which sounds like she doth protest too much, but I think it is. I mean, this is why I'm involved with the Free Speech Union. I think better out than in. I think we should discuss these things and be honest about the fact that actually throughout our entire existence, but especially in the age of multiculturalism, when different races and cultures interact, there are some teething issues. There are some challenges. And actually, if we talk about them and figure out what they are, we can probably resolve them. But if we create the system, which I think exists now, where certain people are allowed to express the grievance, but others aren't, and certain statistics get suppressed because they don't suit the narrative of the government likes to push about one group of people or another. As you said, we don't talk about the violence against Asians. Why? Because it's just not convenient. It doesn't suit the narratives. So in my view, it is more productive for a cohesive society for us to have these conversations than it is for us to dance around and play these games where some people, we just are supposed to know the rules, that some people can say it, but some people can't.
Well, what you're talking about, they're actually walls between people. They're walls between people, that's the purpose of it. Don't comment on that person. Walk on eggshells around that person, because you're different and they're different. That's not multiculturalism.
No, it's creating enclaves.
It's creating, it is. And it's sort of a, it's creating division. Like in South Auckland, we never had that, but we were living a lot closer together. Like if you worked on a process line, which boring job, but one of the most hilarious days you'll ever have in your life, because everyone is there and they're teasing each other and joking and that, but it's like everyone is there. Samoans, Maori, Indian, Bangladeshi, Somalian, Pākehā, young Pākehā, old Pākehā, they're all there, so
it's
all
interesting,
that talk, there's no walls there the way there are but this, again, it's a certain class. It probably doesn't have a lot of lived experience of multiculturalism dictating this stuff.
Well, I found it really interesting. So, I mean, I grew up in Auckland and in a very multicultural schools that I went to and stuff. And I moved to Wellington in my 20s. I was there for 4 years. And I really upset my colleagues. I was working in the public service at that time because I commented one day that Wellington was the whitest place I'd ever been. And they did not like that. I mean, I was born in London, so I've spent a lot of time there as well. So I've, experienced that multiculturalism. And yeah, I was shocked when I moved to Wellington because these are the people making all the decisions, making all these racial policies, which I find very divisive. And yet, if you go into the meeting rooms
and
of
these
public
ethnically
service,
cleansed offices,
we were all like struggling learning our pepeha with not a Māori in sight to help us.
It's like, wouldn't partnership be like employ a couple of Māori?
The thing is, it's just like Wellington is just not as diverse. And I mean, I don't think that you should force populations, like if that's who lives there, then whatever. But the problem is that these white people have taken on this kind of savior complex where they're writing these policies and laws with a vision of what multiculturalism is that they clearly don't understand. I find it really really jarring thinking about how I grew up versus the New Zealand I'm in now. So when I grew up, as I say, I went to little Catholic schools at first that were very multicultural. Then I ended up at an Albert Grammar where I was in the minority. my experience was that we didn't actually talk about race. Like we had like we did multicultural stuff, but we didn't really think of it as anything different because it was just like sprinkled in, like we did the numbers, the colors, we had certain weeks during the year where we did all the like poi and hangi and all that, and so it was all kind of integrated, but it wasn't like everything was in te reo or anything like that. And we kind of just all enjoyed it, and there was never any, like, I don't remember any negativity towards any of that stuff. And this is like whether it was, whiteys or Indian students,
There's
Asian
always
students.
incidents. There's always incidents,
Yeah,
but it's not
for
a societal.
sure. Yeah. But now I look at how kids are at school, and it feels like they're being taught like this racial awkwardness so that they can't relate to each other. And I kind of look back and I think, there just wasn't any of that. Like in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was really quite chill on that front.
How I describe it is we're told now to be reverent to other cultures. I don't care if someone's reverent to my culture or not. It's my humanity I'm worried about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's I think, and this is where South Auckland comes into it, it's the irreverence that actually makes us a sort of light, easy going, makes a lot of those communities easy going.
Yeah.
It's like if you're all together and you just gotta laugh through it. You gotta laugh through it.
And I think if you go into a lot of communities in New Zealand, you'll find that's how people do things.
They're like that anyway. Yeah.
We intermarry, we play sports together, we work together, and actually it is purely that governance level, our public service in particular, who make these policies that differentiate between us.
Probably the worst people in the country to be making the policies too. Like literally, guys, if you're listening, you're the worst people in the country.
If they're listening, they are hating, hate listening, and they're going to clip pictures of me where I look particularly bad. Here you go.
Yeah, I'll be like,
and they're going to clip those. This is what they do. They post pictures of me where they clip me in a bad still.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is what you look. I'm like, okay, that's
my
the argument
my
you
one
have.
is this. Look at the way his nose overlaps his mouth. He looks like Wurzel Gummidge. That'll be my clipped photo. But so just before we wrap up, because we'll be just talking, and it's been fantastic, as I knew it would be.
The rest of the council is going to be like, I thought you were talking about COVID.
They'll be fine with it. But anyway, so we'll end on this. Paddy Gower's apology. Your thoughts? Because I have thoughts.
I've got mixed thoughts.
Okay.
So, one, I appreciate that he has just demonstrated some introspection, and he has considered what kind of message he sent to people, what his role was supposed to be in that space, and he understands. I think he said like he crossed the line into advocacy instead of activist. I would say he didn't cross the line. He friggin' zoomed over it at 100 kilometers an hour.
He had like, it was like a sand jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bless him. It's more than others have done. So I think good on him. He's had some critical thinking, and I've had private communications with a few others in the media who have said similar things but have chosen not to say it publicly. And I can understand why they need to keep getting paid and get jobs. But I do think that on the whole, the media has learnt nothing from this. I was having a wee yarn with Dad yesterday, and he said he got trauma from Nicola Willis got up and held up a piece of paper about the fuel crisis, and it had level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 on it. And he was like, no, not again. Like,
start to hyperventilate, yeah.
And I said to him, like, look at what the government really tried not to have to do that. They wanted to, you could see they were trying to keep people calm. The media were frothing for it. They were like, give us some drama, give us a scale and levels. And like the most important time in their life where they felt they had the most power was during COVID. Because they were able to go and go into the beehive and listen to the 1 PMs, and they chose what information we got from things. And so I think that they are frothing for another crisis. And I hope the government is strong enough to go, we are not playing your game. We are going to do what is best for New Zealanders. But it's really hard when the entire media apparatus is like screaming and yeah.
And is really, really pro in that direction. So my views on Paddy, I listened to his apology a couple times. And, I'm not a person that was super invested in vaccines or anything like that. I mean, I was anti the mandates from a very left-wing position, actually. It's like, for me, don't touch people's jobs. That's just classic left-wing sort of
Mine
stuff.
was don't touch people's autonomy.
yeah, that too. But to me,
I just like the left-wing feminists who were like, take their jobs. I was like, I'm sorry, what happened to my body, my choice? Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. But so I was never that invested. So it wasn't like I was like, you better impress me, Mr. Gower. I wasn't like that. I wasn't in that headspace at all. But I listened to what he had to say a couple of times. I think it was sincere. I think he was very, I think you could tell it was not necessarily even easy. He was a little bit emotional as he talked about it. He took his time and everything. A lot of people on X, the people that are sort of more in the hardcore camp, were like, nope, not accepted. I'm not going to listen to you. You did this.
And I
you did
can
that.
understand their feelings.
Well, you may be, but I don't think it's productive. Because here's the thing: if people apologize and you shoo them away, I mean, if they did something absolutely, and I guess they do think he did do something absolutely horrendous, but and I'm not quite in that camp, but if you're going to shoo them away, why would they? They'll give up eventually. Go, well, screw you.
And
I'm never going to make
argument.
you happy.
I mean, Paddy has done something that Hipkins has not, that any other member of the media has not.
He was with Pat Brittenden 2 days ago with a smirk on his face, talking about cookers and how this inquiry was only about the cookers.
I really wish that a broad spectrum of New Zealand could see him when he's on that show, because he really drops a lot of his pretense.
He's really sort of, because he knows he's got to get a free ride, so he's he's got the smirk, and it's like, no, he's he's problematic. There is no, I've learnt this even through the free speech.
Declaring my bias again.
Well, no, but honestly, I'm giving him advice. It's like through the through the Free Speech Union, through that interaction I had with Mohan Datta, it's like the public apology did not hurt me. It's good to go there. I mean, I think there's this feeling that it'll show weakness and leaders have to be strong. And if you're on a board or something like that, you need to show that you don't really have faults and you're always level-headed and everything. But we're human beings. I think we can go behind the curtain a bit more and show, because there's lessons to be learned when you screw up.
Totally. And I think, I'm willing to accept when I am wrong. I am aggressively resistant when people come at me for things like my opinions that men cannot just suddenly become women. But if I had been saying that for all these years and then some scientific thing came along that proved that actually they could, I'd have to own it, Yeah. But that's not going to happen because it's not
going to
true.
happen yet. No, we got another hour. No.
Let's get on to sex and gender.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, we've been going a while, so it's probably time to wrap it up. But I really enjoyed it, and we should do it more often. I think this was really, really good.
If people listen to us, then sure, we might only get like 4 listeners.
I don't think that'll happen. You are a superstar, sorry. So, okay, Annie O'Brien, thank you so much for this. There may even be updates yet. I know that Winston Peters is wanting to do a vaccine injuries inquiry.
Yeah, I think select committee inquiry or something. I'm not sure how that would work, but
I like the idea of this free speech censorship inquiry attached to it. Maybe we should push for that.
Maybe we should hit Winston up and say, hey, as well as the vaccine thing, we need to talk about speech.
Who knows? It wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Well, thank you, Annie. And we'll speak again soon. To all you people out there fantastic supporters listening to this, you can contact us and comment on this episode or offer ideas for future episodes at fsu. What is it? At podcast? Look, I told you I always screw up the end. And he distracted me though.
Okay, put on the screen here. We will put
podcast at fsu.net. .nz.
Oh my God.
.nz.
He's the best host ever.
I got through it in the end.
We'll put it on the screen. Okay, just ignore what he says and just look at what's on the screen.
Well, take portions of what I said, the good
Lucas,
stuff, and then
put it on the screen.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Free to Speak. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and consider sharing the podcast with others. We release new episodes regularly, and subscribing is the easiest way to stay up to date. If you have any questions, feedback or suggestions, you can contact us at podcast@fsu.nz. If you want to find out more about the New Zealand Free Speech Union, visit fsu.nz.